Good evening, everyone. It's great to have you here. My name's Todd Fraser. I'm one of the founders of Osler and the Chief Medical Officer. I'm also an intensivist and have been a career-long medical educator. So it's great to have you all here tonight. The interest has been very high, as it always is when we give these sorts of presentations, because I think there is still a lot of people out there who are struggling with what the demands are, what they need to do, and have lots and lots of questions. So this is an opportunity for you to ask any questions. So it's one pass, so we might start going. So yeah, this has been put together essentially so that you can ask any questions that you would like about about the CPD home concept. To be fair, we probably didn't get into this to be an accreditation agency. Osler is founded in education and training, not in compliance. And so we've got a very clear interest in trying to help everyone get the most out of themselves. When we saw that the CPD home concept was coming, we thought that we could add something to the mix rather than just trying to enable you to tick off the boxes and get compliance. What we would like to be able to try and do is to support you in making that experience as valuable as we possibly can. So we built a lot of different things into our system, some to make it efficient and easy for you to get through, but other things such as some of the webinars that we run that are designed to make it interesting and valuable to you as well. So I thought I'd start just by going through where we are at with CPD Homes now. So there are many people here who have graduated in 2022 or 2023 who will be doing CPD for the first time as an organised thing. There's also some people who, I won't be naming names, they graduated from medical school before I was even born. So there is a lot of interest here across the spectrum of practitioners. So if you'll bear with me for a little while, I'm going to go back over CPD homes and what they all mean. So all Australian registered doctors need to have a CPD home or a CPD home equivalent. So a CPD home equivalent is something like an intern program, a college training program, or a specialist international medical graduate program that is organised by a college. So all Australian registered doctors need to have a CPD home. This has been in effect for at least 1 year. 2024 was the first mandatory year and 2023 was a phase-in year for all of this. So if you're a PGY1 or a PGY2, you do not need a CPD home in 2025, with the caveat that PGY2s need to be in a hospital in a structured program for their learning. So that's important. So for example, if you're a locum or you're working a part-time gig where you don't actually have a teaching program and a formal training program, then you still need a CPD home. There's lots of edge cases around this. So people coming from overseas, for example. So if you do need to check, either talk to APRA about whether you need one. In most cases, they'll refer you to a CPD home, and you can contact us at support@oslercommunity.com and we can help walk you through it. Pretty much everybody will need one. Many people will be a member of their college CPD program. So if you're a specialist, you might already be covered by that. But the PGY3s right up to specialty training, there's a big group of people who have never had to have an organised CPD home before. And this is what we've built Osler for. What do you need to do with the new CPD program? So the first thing is that you have to register with an accredited CPD home. All of the colleges are automatically a CPD home, and there are five others that have been accredited to provide CPD to other groups of doctors, including Osler, which is allowed to provide CPD to all doctors who need a CPD home. You need to create a plan for your CPD, and I can't stress enough how important this bit is to setting yourself up for success, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. So you need to plan your CPD. You need to do 50 hours of activities across the 12-month period. So the year runs from the 1st of January through to the 31st of December, it's not the same as your registration year. So it's something to be very careful of. There's been a lot of people who have been caught out by that in 2024. The 50 hours can be broken up across a number of different categories, and I'll go into that in some more detail in a minute. And you need to complete any program level requirements or specialty high level requirements that are required for you. So program level requirements are set by your individual CPD home. Specialty high level requirements are additional things that specialists who are registered in certain specialties will need to do. These are set by APRA, and all CPD homes need to comply with that and offer that if they're having those specialists on their programs. So, for example, me as an intensivist, if I join Osler, I need to make sure that I do an advanced airway course every 3 years. That's mandatory for every intensivist on the platform. So that's what they are if you see them. But for most people here, that won't be relevant. So the first step is your plan. So as I often say, you can't get where you're going if you don't have a plan to get there, if you don't have a map. And so it's really important. We put together a webinar that we've got on Osler. This is the QR code that will take you straight to that link, and I'd thoroughly recommend it if you haven't done a CPD plan before. Associated with that is a workbook, which allows you to work through, as you're listening to the webinar, all of the different things that you'll need to incorporate into your plan. It provides you with a structure for how you can get a plan that's going to set you up for the next 12 months. They're supposed to be living documents. They're not supposed to be, you start it and finish it at the start of the year and then you stick to it rigidly. The idea is that it's a guide and that it will be fluid with you through the course of your year, and your priorities might change. But it gives you a way of measuring whether you're actually achieving what you want to do. And then most importantly, at the end of the year, it's mandatory to reflect on your progress through the 12 months and record that as part of your PCDP or your CPD plan. There's an example from Osler. So we go through, and all the different CPD homes have slightly different ways of doing it, but ultimately we try to get you to craft your objectives, do a self-evaluation the best you possibly can, and then create a plan to go along with that. Now, it's important to remember that you get an automatic 3 hours under reviewing performance hours, which I'll come to in a minute, just for doing your CPD plan. And that includes the review at the end of the year. So it's well worth spending the time on it to do it properly. In terms of the 50 hours, the breakdown is as follows. Firstly, you can do 12 and a half, or you have to do a minimum of 12 and a half hours of educational hours. Then you need to do something called reviewing performance and measuring outcomes. So reviewing performance refers to activities that measure the process of care that we give, and measuring outcomes refers to activities that measure the outcomes of that care, if you want to think about it that way. And I'll come to some examples in just a minute. You have to do a total of 25 hours combined. And again, this is one area where we noticed people got into trouble last year. 25 hours combined, of which a minimum of 5 hours needs to be in each category. So 5 of measuring outcomes, 5 of reviewing performance, all right? And then the rest of that 25 can be made up of either of those categories, depending on your practice. You might lean one way or the other. So that 25 plus 12 and a half hours of educational hours leaves another 12.5 to do to get to 50 hours. And that needs to be spent on any of those categories. For most people, it will probably be another 12.5 hours of educational activities, because that's what we tend to see. Most people enjoy that better. But it could be any of those groups. Okay, so that's the breakup of what you need to do. As I said, learning activities, somewhere between 12 and a half and 25 hours of your time you'll spend on those. They can be anything that's relevant to your scope of practice, and that can be outside your immediate work conditions. So, for example, if you are interested in the ethics of communication or something like that. You want to explore that in more detail, or you want to do an ALS course, but you work in general practice, for example, and you might not see acute resuscitation all that often. That doesn't matter. They're all things that are around your scope of practice and your work life. You must document the learning outcomes of any activity that you do. This is a really critical point, and it serves three purposes. The first is that it makes it go through your cortex a second time, so it drives learning. There's some evidence behind that. The second thing is that it serves as a form of evidence for the activity that you did. And again, having just gone through the audit process this year, it's where a lot of people fell down on their audit. And the third thing that it does is that it allows you to search your portfolio again in the future for the bits of information that you've learned. So it does have a good use. You also must provide evidence, and the evidence for any activity is usually laid out in the terms and conditions or policies of your CPD home. You need to be careful that you provide sufficient evidence that the auditors can assess it and be confident that the activity actually occurred. So make sure that you check all of that out very carefully. So measuring outcomes and reviewing performance. I think the reason why these are combined into one category of 25 hours is because there's a significant amount of overlap. And so I don't actually think it matters too much which group it goes into, as long as you're finding things that measure the process or outcomes of the care that you give, or for those who are non-clinical, the work that you do that you need your medical license for. So you might be in research, you might be in teaching, you might be in some other activity, but whatever you use your medical license for, you want to try and measure those things in some way. So if you think about it, it's what we do. How do you measure what we do and what is important to you as a clinician? It's got to be 25 hours combined, 5 of each. Importantly, you do not have to necessarily focus on you and your own practice. You can do it as a collective. So for example, for me, I work in an intensive care unit. I don't have to measure my own outcomes. I could do that at a unit level or a hospital level if I wanted to. There's no reason that you can't do that. They don't have to be hard statistical outcomes. So for example, narrative feedback is a very rich source of feedback to you as a clinician about how you're performing, but there's no statistical analysis of that necessarily. And finally, even if you do some sort of statistical analysis, you don't have to benchmark that against anyone. Might be useful for you to re-examine this over the course of several years, but there's no requirement for you to meet any sort of benchmark. So examples of what you could do for reviewing performance feedback, as I mentioned. Self-reflections are very useful. They're effectively measuring what you've done, but you're doing it yourself. Any sort of in-workplace assessment, such as I think, what are they called? A DOPS analysis or a workplace assessment or an end-of-term assessment. All of those things can be claimed as reviewing performance. If you're doing practice improvement projects, so you're looking at a process of care in your unit and you review that and update it, that can be claimed in that regard. And as I mentioned before, professional development plan is a form of self-reflection in many ways. So you can claim that as a reviewing performance activity too. For measuring outcomes, it's been a bit harder. Audit is the one that most people fall back to. So you can measure a number of different outcomes, whether they be related to the process or to the outcome of care. There is a webinar that we've done on how to run an audit if you're doing it for the first time, as well as a guidebook that you can download. So for an assessment, you can claim any time that you associate with that particular activity. So it might be any preparation time, the time that you were actually assessed, the time that you got feedback from the person doing the assessment, and then any time that you sit there thinking about it and apply yourself. So we're fairly liberal at Osler, at least, about how we interpret this, but we need to be able to recognise those things. The only thing we ask is that you detail those things in the description when you put them into your logbook. The other one that people use a lot is case reviews, and that can take different formats. One could be a root cause analysis at the higher end of severity, right down to a grand rounds presentation of a case or a case review, a morbidity mortality meeting in your practice or your unit, etc. Those sorts of meetings and where the outcomes of care are analysed can be claimed as measuring outcomes. One that I didn't mention in reviewing performance that a lot of people do is multidisciplinary team meetings as well, because you're often discussing the process of care, bouncing different ideas off different clinicians, so they can be claimed as well. So take the time to do these things and document them in your logbook as you're going along, because there's a lot more points than you realise, and it can make things much, much easier for you to get to your tallies. Just remember to put some documentation in, such as an agenda, de-identified, of course, and make sure that the learning outcomes aren't went to a meeting, because that's going to be rejected out of hand. You need to put something in that describes the sorts of things that you might have learned in that process. The other thing that you can claim from Osler's perspective is the Osler case review webinars. So some of you I can see already have been to those webinars in the past. We put these on in response to some feedback that a lot of people are having trouble getting their measuring outcome hours up, particularly people in locum positions or those sorts of things where they didn't have access to morbidity mortality meetings. We present a case. That case often has broad issues across the industry, so they're not just focused on one particular industry. And they'll talk about things like ethics and processes and so on that come up repeatedly in various clinical incidents. They'll take about 90 minutes. You can claim 90 minutes for your measuring outcomes hours. They're free to attend, whether you're a member of Osler or not, and there'll be a QR code a bit later so that you can get access. As I mentioned, these measuring outcomes, reviewing performance hours are quite challenging to get. There is a specific webinar on that and lots of resources on Osler on the homepage if you want to check those out. They talk about things like how do you do an audit for the first time? How do you do a self-reflection? Those sorts of things. There's heaps and heaps of resources out there. The program level requirements, as I mentioned, are delivered by the program or set by the program themselves. Each CPD home has been instructed by the medical board to include 4 parts of the code of conduct into their programs. And each CPD home will do it in different ways. Those 4 areas are culturally safe practice, ethical behaviour, professional behaviour, and addressing health inequities. So you need to check with your CPD home about how they want you to do that. In Osler, what we expect as an example is that when you're doing your CPD plan for the year, that you include how you're going to address each of those issues in your CPD plan for the year. The other thing that we expect is that you do at least one activity where that topic was the key element of the activity. To make it easier for people, as an example, we've created collections for each of those where there might be a podcast on Aboriginal health outcomes. There might be an ethical discussion, for example, end-of-life care, those types of things. And so there's lots of resources that are already set up there to help you achieve those things. The reason that these have been included is because the medical board has put particular emphasis on these four areas. I don't know the background to why, but that's what they've done, and we all need to deliver the same thing. Specialty high-level requirements I won't go into in any detail, but they're available on the website and also on the APRA and medical board websites. that you can go through. But just be aware, if you are a specialist, there are 9 separate colleges now that have requirements that you need to be aware of. You feel free to send me an email if you want to know a bit more detail about that. So just to give you an example of the level of detail that is expected, this is an example of a self-reflection where somebody has had an incident that they have reflected back on and are recorded the things that they thought went well, the things that they thought they could improve on, and then some deliberate actions that they're going to take going ahead. So that's just to give you an idea of what sort of detail we think is a good example. So of that, key points: spend time on your plan. If you spend time thinking about what your weaknesses are, what you want to achieve, what the gaps are that are stopping you from getting where you want to go, and very clear about those, then you'll find that it's much easier to achieve your targets for the year. So I'd thoroughly recommend that. And as I mentioned earlier, focus on learning outcomes and make sure that your documentation is up to date. For those of you who don't know, every CPD home is required to audit 5% of its membership each year at random for whether they have complied or not with the program requirements. So we've just gone through that process with Osler at the moment. And these are the key things that all of the CPD homes will be looking at. Just a reminder, the CPD home year goes from the 1st of January to the 31st of December. Okay. For Osler, we allow you to enter data up to the 31st of January. At that point, it gets locked. Your portfolio can't be added to or edited, and we enter into the audit phase. There have been some grace periods given during the last couple of months for various reasons, but I would not count on being allowed to access it. Your records must be updated by the 31st of January to be compliant. The audit phase then happens, after which all members are notified of their outcome, and then you don't have to do anything. If you've successfully completed it, then Osler or any CPD home will notify APRA of the outcome. And so that will be around the middle of 2026 for the 2025 year. If you are not successful in completing it, then that result is communicated to APRA as well. You might be a member of 2 CPD homes, as an example. You might be in your college, you might be in Osler as well. If you complete Osler but don't complete your college, the college will report that you were non-compliant. But as long as you have got 1 CPD home saying that you are compliant, then you'll be fine. That's the expectation from the medical board. Staying on track, it's important to keep up to date with where you are with your progress. Each of the CPD homes has its own dashboard that helps you to keep track of where you need to get to. And you can see here that on the right, there's mostly grey on that dashboard, which means that the person has not done very well. That's me, by the way. The second one on the left shows a much more complete looking portfolio, but there's still some work to do in measuring outcomes and in the combined total. So keep an eye on that and make sure that you're on track to pass through the year. All the CPD homes will provide you with updates along the way. We send regular emails that tell you how many hours you've done and where you compare with other people, how many we would expect you've done, give you a reminder on your CPD plan, etc., etc. So there will be lots of reminders going on throughout the course of the year. So if I can talk briefly about Osler and what we offer, as I said, we get into this to make it easier for you to achieve your goals and to learn. So we've built in a bunch of automation tools, one of which is to be able to immediately add any educational activities that you can do on Osler. So we've got a very extensive library of about 2,500 items, including podcasts, quizzes, articles, modules, journal reviews, videos, infographics, you name it. There's a ton of stuff on there, and it spreads across a range of different cohorts within the medical profession. So as an example, if you did this module, there's a button at the bottom here which goes blue when you've completed the activity. You click on that, it'll open up a box where you can enter your learning outcomes, and then you're done. You don't have to add any evidence, because doing it and having it recorded within our system is evidence enough. So that's an easy way of getting some of your activities up. The other thing that we've done is to make a lot of the other functions within Osler automated as well. So for example, if you go to your patient and procedure logbook, every patient you add, you get 0.1 hours, and same for procedures. So if you're in a procedural kind of specialty, it's very easy to get the hours up under measuring outcomes, because it's considered a self-audit. Self-reflections, everyone that you do will automatically be given 0.5 hours. You can increase that if you spend particularly long time with that particular self-reflection. Sorry. The other thing that we've built in is feedback. So any of these records, so let's say you do a procedure and you've had somebody watching you and you want to get some feedback from them. When you complete the procedure, you can click a button at the bottom which generates a link that you can send to that supervisor in any way that you want: WhatsApp, text messages, email, whatever it might be. And they can then provide you with some feedback. And that then automatically gets added to your portfolio as another 15 minutes under reviewing performance. So it's a great way of racking up the extra points and getting this all over and done. But at the same time, it's very useful because you're getting more feedback, you're getting more support, etc. And then, of course, your PCDP or your CPD plan gives you 3 hours automatically. You can see that these all roll up down here at the bottom, automatically calculating hours. You can then open them up and see the root records that are underneath those. So just an example, so I did a presentation not too long ago for a group of surgical assistants, and tried to map out what it might look like for them. And they're all, like most people, thinking, how on earth am I going to fit an extra 50 hours of activities into my busy schedule? It might not be that bad, actually. So it's pretty easy to do 25 hours of learning. If you think about the things that you'll look up, the things that you, the talks that you go to, you might read a couple of articles, you might listen to a podcast, all of those things will count, and you can easily get those 25 hours. With your plan, you'll get 3 hours of reviewing performance. If you record 50 cases at 0.1 hours, there's another 5 hours. If there's one procedure on each of those, on average, then there's another 5 hours. If you do some feedback on those, you can easily get another 4 or 5, even 6 hours. And then you do one self-reflection a month, there's another 6 hours, and that's your 25 hours done. Your 50 hours done. So it is achievable. You just need to start doing it and do it early, and then keep doing it throughout the year, and you can get your way through there. We know it's challenging for a lot of people. It's really challenging to find things that are suitable. So we've put together as many resources as we can to help get you started. There's a section on the homepage for training plans. So those training plans are looking at the common craft groups who are members of Osler, such as a junior doctor, a career medical officer in emergency, those sorts of things. And there's, I think, about 8 training plans there. And they have suggestions for all the things that you might want to do for measuring outcomes, educational and reviewing performance hours. And you can copy and paste those into your PCDP if you want to, and then modify them as you see fit. You don't have to stick to our plans. Our medical education officer, Dr. Chris Gilbert, has put together Osler in Focus. So each month she reviews a hot area. So for example, one month is mental health, another month might be surrounds NAIDOC week and Indigenous health. Over summer, she's done bites and critters and all those sorts of things as well. And she looks at podcasts and articles and modules and all the different things that you can do around that theme. So they're well worth reading through each month. She also does a best of the web collection. So, for example, there's a collection of podcasts for general practitioners, and she will add new ones as they come up. So they're a great way of having a look at what's the latest there. We send out newsletters each month, twice a month, with any new opportunities that come about. And there's collections of the program level requirements, as we talked about. Obviously, there's Osler's library. And then finally, we've also introduced an AI coach, which we've been training for about 18 months now. So you can ask it as many questions as you like about your CPD. And it might be things like, give me some suggestions for a general medical junior doctor for an audit, and it will give you some examples of the things that you might want to do. And then you can ask it, how do I do an audit? And it will walk you through some steps. So that's well worth having a look at too, to give you some ideas. If any of you, I think there's about 40 people who have not yet signed up to a CPD home. If you're interested in joining Osler, there's a promo just for you. So this EB2025 code, if you want to join up, you can get that for a reduced price, and there's a 2-year deal as well, which is pretty good. So just to look at some of the common questions that have been coming through. Writing your PCDP and help with that. As I mentioned, I would thoroughly recommend going to the webinar and looking through that. We've had really good feedback from people saying that it's helped them to structure their approach to the PCDP. So that would be the first thing that I would do. There's also some articles on Osler that you can do. The other thing about the PCDP is that you can get feedback on that as well. There's the button at the bottom of your PCDP where you can click and send that to a supervisor or more than one supervisor, so that you can ask them for ideas on how you can improve your PCDP and get the best plan you possibly can. So there are 2 tips that I would have for that. Another common question is the best way to complete your MO and RP hours. The most common things that people do are feedback. There is a feedback pack that we've generated that can help you. It's got a template that you can use. It's got a structured approach to giving that feedback out. So I'd download that. That link is in the resources section of Zoom, of the meeting that we're in at the moment. Audits are very common as well, and you can claim all parts of the audit as well. Things like the preparation and research that you do, designing the tool that you're going to use, the data collection, the analysis, any presentation that you do to other people, and then formulating what you're going to do about the results into the future. So you can claim all of that, just detail it in the description. And of course, you can always repeat an audit that you've done in previous years as well to see what progress is like. Multidisciplinary team meetings, as I mentioned, that's a very useful one because there is a lot to learn from those types of patient discussion meetings. So you can claim those. And as I mentioned, the patient outcome meetings are very helpful as well. I won't talk about the program level requirements because I think we've already done that, but exemptions is an important one that keeps coming up. So there are some people who can be exempt. According to the medical board, if you're having more than 6 months full-time leave or greater, then you can be eligible for an exemption. Everyone else needs to do the same amount of CPD. And unfortunately, part-timers can't get a reduction. You still need to do the 50 hours regardless. That's a medical board requirement. But you can get an exemption if you're having an extended period of leave, more than 6 months. To do so, you often need to provide some documentation to support your claim. And the medical board's preferred approach to this is a pro rata reduction. So if you had more than 6 months off, you would get have to do 0.5 of your requirements, or 25 hours as an example. If you are in any doubt as to whether you can apply, then contact your CPD home. By all means, send me an email and I can put you on to the people that you can talk to. Evidence of procedures. There was a question about what evidence is required for the logbook and procedures. In Osler's example, we don't require additional proof or evidence. You logging it in your logbook is the act in itself, and we accept it on that basis. The other thing that I would do is make sure that you plan on doing a reflection on your logbook towards the end of the year. So effectively what you're getting points for is the act of collecting the data. You can then analyze your data independently and reflect on it, and you can count that as a self-reflection as well. So there's a lot of extra points that you can claim for that. Had somebody ask about a master's program. So higher level learning does indeed count towards it as an educational activity. So you can certainly count that. There may be elements within those programs that can be counted towards measuring outcomes or reviewing performance as well. So for example, if you, as part of that, had a supervisor provide you with some feedback on your progress, then you could count that as part of your reviewing performance hours. One of the most common questions that we get is about non-clinical doctors and locums and what they can do. There's a couple of things that I'd suggest about that. The first is to go back to the start and think about, how do you know that you're doing a good job? What's important to you? And try to find a way of measuring that. So for example, let's say you're the director of clinical services at a hospital and you want to do that. You might say your feedback from people who you work with, like the clinical directors, about your performance. It might be an assessment by your supervisor. Those sorts of things are possible. So those are the sorts of things that I would think about as options for measuring outcomes. You might also, for example, as a researcher, be able to audit the work that you do. So that might be another option for you as well. But rather than me providing all the answers, I think the community that we have together can come up with ideas as well. And we've created a Facebook group, which is in the links section in the resources tab. That Facebook group is non-denominational in terms of the CPD home. What we'd encourage you to do is, regardless of which home you use, to go to that group and join it and share your experiences and ideas of what you've done to achieve your CPD targets. You know, for example, what audits did you decide to do? And then you can ask questions of the community as well. We really would like to see that grow, because I think the industry itself is the best source of this sort of idea. So one person writes, if you're doing a research such as writing a case study on one patient or doing a retrospective cohort study, can they be claimed under measuring outcomes? Yes, indeed they can. There's no doubt about that. Brent, I think I've inadvertently answered your question about the evidence for procedures. So we don't ask for any extra evidence. It's all included within logging them into the logbook. For medico-legal work, a really interesting question, and I'd be delighted to hear other people's suggestions on it. But as I mentioned, how do you feel like you know that you're doing a good job? You might select to review a number of the reports that you write and measure them against some sort of checklist that you've developed yourself to determine whether you're including everything that you want to. You might get some people to review your medico-legal work on your behalf to give you an external viewpoint of that information. So those are the sorts of things that I'd be looking at. But I'd strongly encourage you to talk to other people who are in that field to see whether they've got other ideas on what might be possible. Coming to the measuring outcomes, the case reviews would be a really good way of racking up those hours as well for you. PGY3, but attended online courses of PGY2 last year. You can only claim activities that you have done in this particular year. So it's now 2025. For 2025, you can only claim activities you've done in 2025. So I think I'm answering that. Can you claim procedures? Yes, if you log them in your logbook, you can certainly claim those activities. A question about activities that are done outside Australia. Can they be claimed? Absolutely. So not only that, but you can claim them back to the 1st of January, even if you join in October. So as long as you are getting those activities in, then that's completely fine. Just one thing for anyone who's an IMG. If your date of first registration is after the 1st of July, then you're entitled to a pro rata reduction as well. There were a lot of people who came to Australia and registered in August, September, October, even through to December, who were unaware that they were required by the medical board to do CPD in 2024. You still do, but you can get a pro rata reduction so that you don't need to do it all. But the extra benefit is that you can claim activities that you did right back to the 1st of January. So you're actually able to do that pretty easily. So if you know anyone who this applies to, then please let them know and get them to contact your CPD home to ask for a reduction. Registration for next week's case. If you contact me through my email, I can send you another link if you've had trouble there. During courses like NEO, resource, etc., count under education, right? Yes, this is a really common question, Josh. If the assessment is of the learning that you have just done, then it's educational. So from our perspective, if you do a quiz about something that you've learned, or you do a scenario in an advanced course like that, then they're still considered educational activities. If you're doing a quiz or a simulation with the specific purpose of analysing your current practice, then that's a different scenario, and that would count under reviewing performance. Reviewing performance. So sometimes activities will have a bit of both. It's important to contact your CPD home about it to get some clarification, and we're happy to do so. If you send a message to our support team, they will let you know exactly what you can claim. New surgical assistant struggling to find relevant CPD learning activities. Yep, really common problem. Unfortunately, the changes that have been put in place by the medical board are all-encompassing, and it's interesting how difficult it has been for some craft groups to be able to comply. We've got a lot of sympathy for people in that position. There is a limited amount that we can do about it. We can't possibly create content that suits every possible craft group's needs. So you're going to have to look externally, and you can claim as many external activities as you like. That being the case, that doesn't necessarily make it easy for people. So one of the reasons that we put together the training plans was to try and provide people with some guidance. The same with the Vest of the Web and those sorts of things. So have a look in there to see whether there's any suggestions. I would go to the Facebook group and ask whether there's any suggestions there. I know that there's a group in Brisbane, Teabag, that do have educational activities and so on. And there's obviously the National Conference for MSASA. So you might want to try and get to that one to be able to claim a lot of hours in one hit. MSASA should be able to give you some suggestions as well. And I think they've even got a couple of presentations on their website that you might be able to look at too. I hope that helped. I know it's very difficult. Teaching and supervision of training for registrars in colleges. Yes, that can all be claimed as educational activities. The medical board have said that teaching and training and supervision is an educational activity. So you can certainly claim that if you are in that sort of position. What if creating your plan doesn't take 3 hours? Well, I'd suggest that it does. I would certainly claim the 3 hours that you are automatically given. You can't claim more than that. That's a medical board restriction. And it does include the time that you take to reflect. Hopefully, the fact that it is automatically given 3 hours reflects the importance that the medical board puts on spending time doing it. And then you can feel very comfortable that you claim the 3 hours. Claiming reading articles, yes, you absolutely can. Just remember to evidence them. Put down what you learned. I think learning outcomes are the best form of evidence that you could possibly have. So spend the time documenting what you learned and make sure that you put in the reference of an article that you claimed, and that's completely fine. Somebody asking about the logging the procedures. The logging the procedures automatically counts because you're recording the act of collecting the data. So you don't need to do the self-reflection, but obviously there's not much point in doing the data collection unless you're going to review it. So we would assume that you do exactly that. And then you can create a reflection and claim some extra time for the effort that you're putting into having a look at your data. If you review a complex patient with prominent cultural issues, can you claim that as tick the cultural box? Yes, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. You just have to be able to justify it. And unfortunately, a lot of people have been randomly ticking boxes and have failed the audit as a result. So just be careful. You do not have to put a program level requirement against every activity that you do, only the ones that are predominantly associated with that activity. And you only have to do one of each of those 4 in any 12-month period. Yeah, we can certainly try to put the webinar registrations. In fact, we do. There's now a calendar in the top row of the featured thing on the homepage. In that calendar, you'll find the registration links. So you can go there. It's got all the milestones for the year. So when you need to have things done by, things to think about, and then as we go on through the year, we'll be putting all of the registration links for any of the events that we have. So you'll be able to access them there as well. But yes, that's a great idea. Thank you. We record all of those sessions as well, and they're hosted on the website so that you can go and look at the ones from last year as well. There's no problem with doing that and claiming them as well. Mentoring IMGs, that's an educational activity as well. Mentorship is considered an educational activity, a bit like training and supervision. Yes, you can log all of your surgical assistant cases. That's a good way of doing it. And periodically send a case request for feedback to the surgeon that you're working with and get some feedback on what you could do better to enhance your performance. And that would help to boost that up as well. Do we check all claims? No, we don't. We check 5%. We do also do spot audits and random checks, not for the purpose of rejecting activities, but for the purpose of helping you make sure that you're as compliant as you can be. So if you've not got enough detail in the learning outcomes area, then we will let you know and help to coach you to improve things. You can always send us an email if you want to and get us to check things. We're more than happy to do that as well. We'd rather be proactive about it and stop you getting into trouble during the audit wherever possible. Helena, yes, the session will be recorded, absolutely. review of your own clinical material for the purpose of a journal publication. Yes, so there'd probably be two parts to that. The writing of the article and the publication of it would be EA, but the review of the information, the clinical material, or doing an assessment of your own practice, that could be considered reviewing performance. At the moment, you have to enter those as two activities rather than splitting the time between the two categories, which some people have found a bit frustrating, but there's some technical reasons why we've left it that way. Poster presentations at the medical conferences. So yeah, you can claim all the time that it took you to prepare the poster. You can also claim the time that you're presenting the poster. And that's very reasonable to do. The conference itself you'd be claiming as educational activity, separately to that. You can't double dip. Like if you've spent an hour presenting, you can't also claim that hour as going to the conference. So just be mindful of that. It's largely about being reasonable in claiming those things. A weekly blog for patients. That sounds very interesting. Where would this fit in? You might have to send me an email about that one. I'm not sure. I'd have to understand a little bit more detail about what you're doing. It sounds like an educational activity to me on the surface of it, unless there was something more to it than that. Could you advise where the Osler member CPD homepage to get log the end of year review? So it's back in your plan. Right at the bottom of the plan is a box that says review for last year, but it's changed to reflection for 2025. So you go in there, click the edit button, and you can type your reflection into your PCDP. Yes, we should probably continue that offline, Helena, but I think that would probably be considered an educational activity. So just go to the chat quickly. If you've been selected for an audit, when you're selected by an audit, I don't know about the other CPD homes, but we notify you in the start of January, and we give you 4 weeks, I think, 3 to 4 weeks to ensure that your CPD is audit proof. So we give coaching on what to do and what to focus on, and you've got until the 31st of January to ensure that your profile is up to date and is as good as it can be. So you will know before your portfolio is locked. In most cases, if something is missing or there's a query over one of the activities or whatever that might be, you'll receive some feedback about that and be given an opportunity to do something about it before the audit closes and the final result is given. Then, just so that everyone's aware, at the end of that process, once the final results are given, there is a reassessment, review, and appeal process that can be enacted after that for specific criteria. So you might want to look at that ahead of time, but that's always an option that you can go through if there has been, for some reason, an issue that has stopped you from complying. Does Osler have a logbook function? Yes, we do. There's a full logbook function built into the system. You're allowed to have only one type of activity to meet the review performance. Yes, yep. You absolutely can, Jose. You can do everything. You can do self-reflections for the entire thing. Not for the 25 hours, because you still have to have the 5 hours of measuring outcomes. But effectively, you can do 20 hours worth of self-reflections and that would count. Is there any hours for participating in MDTs? What's an MDT? If we're talking about multidisciplinary team meetings, I think that's what you're referring to. Yes, you can claim those as reviewing performance hours. again, provide some documentation such as the minutes or an agenda or something like that. Make sure they're de-identified. Even though Osler is a very secure platform, do not put patient data in that's identifiable. You also should put some fairly detailed learning outcomes in for those sorts of activities too, if that's what you want to find. Yep. Yep. So yes, you can say it. So I think I've got to the end of the questions and we've got to the end of our hour almost perfectly. Oh, sorry about that. If you've one more question from Jonathan. If you move from the UK from November, but do not start work in Australia until mid-December, do you still need a CPD home? Yes, you do. The rules are that it's from the date of registration, not the date that you started work. Unfortunately, well, it might be worth you emailing me, Jonathan. We can talk about what to do from here. So send me an email. So you can just email support@oslercommunity.com and address it to me and I'll get it. So that would be worthwhile. Who does the audit? Not a silly question. We train our own internal auditors. So they measure all activities against our program level requirements. So you can look that up in the policies section and see what we audit against. So the purpose of the audit is twofold. One is to confirm that you've done it. The second is to help to coach you to get to the level of data accuracy that is required. I suspect the medical board will be a little bit more lenient, as this is the first time that most people have been doing organised CPD. Of course, everyone's supposed to have been doing 50 hours of CPD already prior to this year. But for people who are rolling on as PGY3s, this is really the first time that you've done anything like this. So I think there's probably some leniency. That notwithstanding, I think as time goes on, that level of leniency will go down, and we'll need to see better compliance with what's required. Kevin says, have you had any estimate at this stage as to the rates of compliance, non-compliance? I'm not sure this is the forum for me talking about it, unfortunately. Certainly there have been some people who haven't complied for various reasons, and they're about to go through the review process. So we'll see how that all plays out. One way or another, we all have to report the outcomes, excuse me, to APRA on the 30th of June. So that'll be the last time that you can do it. After that, excuse me, sorry, anyone who's failed to comply, the medical board will take over management of those people. I think my voice is about to give out. So if anyone's got any other questions, please feel free to email me. We'll go back through these questions and put together a quick cheat sheet, and we'll circulate that around to anyone who's attended for a special bonus for people who've come along. This meeting has been recorded. We'll put all that together and we'll post it, and we'll allow you to access it after the fact. Please share this with as many people as you know who are in the same position as you, who need some help getting going. We're always willing to help and would love to see as many people join as possible, and we can do some pretty cool things. So thanks very much for attending tonight. I hope you found it informative. Please provide some feedback when we close the session. We'd love to hear some more about what you would like to hear about next time, and that would be fantastic. Have a great evening. We'll see you next time.